All right, let's start creating our Glue Backend API module, and we're going to place that module inside the Glue folder because we're talking about a Glue API. So let's right click here and let's create a folder. And the folder, we follow the naming convention, name of the entity, plural, in this case, Antelopes. And we're creating this API for the backend. So we add backend API and everything camel case. Inside the Antelopes Backend API, we're going to create the main files, the config file. We follow the same naming convention. So let's create the file with the same name, Antelopes Backend API, and then config.php. And inside this file, we create our class. The class name is AntelopesBackendApiConfig, and we're going to extend from AbstractBundleConfig. And let's first add the namespace here. And this class is going to extend AbstractBundleConfig from Spryker Glue kernel. Okay, here we're going to define a constant to reference our resource. And in this case, we're going to call it resource, and then the name of the resource, Antelopes, and the value is going to be Antelopes. So the plural name of the entity. We're going to be adding some more constants as we go along with the coding, but this is enough for the time being. And now let's create also the dependency provider. And we're going to call it Antelopes Backend API Dependency Provider. And we're going to extend the abstract bundle dependency provider from kernel backend abstract bundle dependency provider. And here we're going to implement the method provide backend dependencies. And you can see here that we have access to the container from this namespace, kernel backend container. And here we're going to define our dependency. In this Glue module, we need to have access to the facade from the Antelopes module in the Z layer. So when we need any dependency from some other layer, we need to add that dependency through the dependency provider. So we need to add the Antelope facade into this container. So let's create a method and let's call it add. When we add something to the container, then we prefix the method with add and then what we're going to add. In this case, Antelope facade. And then we're going to call the container. We're going to call the set method, and then we're going to define an ID for that resource so that we can then, through the factory, have access to this resource. We can create, for example, a constant here inside the class, and we're going to call it static. And then we call it facade because that's what we're going to be inserting into the container. And then the name of the facade underscore antelope. We don't have that constant, so we just can click add constant and we give the name facade antelope. We declare it public because we're going to need it from the factory. Then we pass a function here which receives the container, and then we then return container, then get locator antelope facade. So here you can see that we call get locator, then the name of what we're going to fetch from the container, in this case antelope, and what type of antelope we're going to retrieve from the container, in this case the facade. So if we were, for example, to get the client, the antelope client, it would be get locator antelope client. Or for example, if we need the storage client, then it would be storage and then client instead of facade. And then here we return the container. This is the pattern that Spryker uses. So we receive the container, then we add the container here, and then we return when we call the dependency, then through the locator, we're going to locate the antelope facade and return it. And so we just return the container here. So we call the parent provide backend dependencies, and then we reassign the container to the return of the antelope facade. In this way, and of course, we return also the container. In this way, we already have the antelope facade here in the container, in the dependency provider. We would need a factory to create an instance of this antelope facade. Let's create the factory. Let's just right click, create class. We give it a name, always Antelopes Backend API, and in this case is factory. And we're going to be extending from abstract factory from Glue kernel backend. And here we create the method to get the antelope facade. In this case, we're going to call it get antelope facade, and then we type hint here that it has to return antelope facade interface, and that's why we have declared this interface in the Antelopes module. And here we can just return this get provided dependency and we pass the key. And in order to get access to that key, then we call AntelopesBackendApiDependencyProvider and we pass facade Antelope. Up to this point, we have the skeleton of the Antelopes Backend API. We have the module name, Antelopes Backend API in a folder. We have the configuration class. We have the dependency provider because we need to get access to the facade, to Antelopes facade. Then we create a factory so that we can retrieve that facade out of the dependency provider. And we're gonna also include here the instant creation of the Antelope reader, Antelope writer that we're gonna develop in the next lessons. So see you soon in our next lessons. Bye.